Hi everyone, and welcome to the first class of NUKE 309. And I must say I'm really excited because what we're going to work on in this course is equal to working on a feature film. The quality of the material is high. These are 3K plates, and the shots are challenging, very challenging, and each one of the three shots has its own little quirks and problems that we'll have to solve. So it's not going to be easy, but it's definitely going to be interesting. In addition to the three shots that we're going to work on, you'll get a fourth shot that's completely for you to work on. And who knows, maybe the best ones will find their way into the film. So in this class, I want to start by analyzing the three shots and kind of identifying the problems and what's ahead of us, and then move on to talk about color, procedure, and workflow for VFX, the way it is usually in movies. So a lot to do. Let's get started. So as you can see, I'm having a Hero opened here, and we're going to use this software quite a lot in the course. Hero basically comes in two flavors. There's the big Hero, the one that I'm having here, the one that we have at the FX PhD VPN. And there's also Hero Player, which is very similar, only it can't export anything. So you can't use it for ingesting material, but you can use it as a wonderful review tool, and that's how I use it all the time. And there are several advantages, because when you review shots for your own or as a supervisor, you want to be able to quickly compare between different versions. You want to be able to A/B between your latest take and the plate, for example. And Hero does all that and has some real nice goodies that I'll show you as we go through the course. For now, we simply want to open the three shots and look at them. And one of the advantages of Hero, and one of the reasons I really like it, is that it caches really fast. So let's load one of the shots, for example 340, and I'll just double click on it, and you can see how quickly it caches. So that shot exists on my SSD drive, which helps, of course, but even from a regular drive it will be pretty fast, and in a matter of like a second or two you can already play the shot in real time. And again, we're talking about 2880 by 1620. So that in itself is great. So now that I'm done with my promotion to Hero and the Foundry, let's go and look at our first shot. And when I say look at it, I really mean kind of analyze it. And this is important. If you're a compositor, it's important that you look at the shot and figure out in advance what you'll need to do instead of just jumping on it without thinking ahead. It's important to plan. If you're a supervisor, you definitely want to look at the shot and assess how much time and how much effort it will take. And you have to give that information to the producer, who needs to bid on it and give it a price. And it's very easy to make a mistake as a compositor, look at it and say, oh, well, you know, that's a green screen shot. Easy. Of course it's not. It's actually a very hard shot for many reasons. So let's look at it and figure out why. So what we have here is this, this girl, the hero of the movie, stepping out into her balcony. And what we're supposed to be seeing is a sort of a panorama of the city, because the balcony is supposed to be on a high floor. Now, the reason there is a green screen there is because the balcony is not really on a high floor, and it's kind of blocked by other houses. So the first issue you can see quite immediately is the tracking. This is a very, very hard track. The camera does an almost 180-degree turn. Well, why almost? It does a 180-degree turn. But because we have no depth in the shot, everything is blocked by the green screen, there is hardly any parallax. And the tracking is one thing we're not going to do in this course because it is so hard. You're more than welcome to try and do it on your own, but we will provide you with a track. So now that we know that we'll have a track, it's a bit reassuring. Let's look at the other problems. So, yellow tracking markers on a green screen. It's easy to remove them when they're far from her, but once they go into her hair, as you can see here, we need to go and paint them out one by one. Now I'll show you the technique to do that later on in the course, but that's one difficulty we have. Green screen is very uneven. There is lots of folds. There is lots of shadowing. We'll see how we can deal with that, but that of course doesn't make the shot easier. Now we have all these stands. They're standing on the floor, they're over the green screen, they're getting in her hair. Looking at that, we have to find a way to get rid of all these, especially when they go into her hair. Get rid of them over the green screen, but also clean plate them on the ground. And when you see so many of them on the floor, one thing you might come to a conclusion is that instead of just clean plating each piece of these from the floor, it might be easier to just replace the entire floor. And this is probably what we're going to do. Oh, a few tracking markers here. Spill. Is that spill that's going on here? Everything is green. What is it? Is that spill? I mean, the first assumption is that it's spill, but this is when you really want to look at some photography from the location to figure out what the original colors are, because when you have such a big giant screen kind of choking everything, you can assume that everything will have a lot of spill. So luckily we have some photos, and I brought a few here of the original location. So here is how the balcony looks without the green screen. It's actually pretty nice, but it's not serving the purpose of the movie. We have buildings blocking everything, and also we want to make the balcony look a bit more modern, rich people's penthouse style, not this kind of concrete. But one thing we can see is that we have those shades, and those shades are actually greenish. So when we go back to our shot, we have to be careful not to just automatically dispel everything. Now, let's talk about environment. We just looked at all the problems of tracking and marker removal, rig removal, and so forth. We have nothing here besides the floor. So we're supposed to, we need to extend the floor, build the railing or whatever is there at the edge of the balcony, and then, of course, put a background in there. And that background should serve us for a big camera move. So it's not a simple, one plate background. We need to either use a panoramic stitch or create something similar that will serve us. So, oh, and here that shadow under the green screen is never very helpful. So basically, this is a tough shot, and we'll spend a few classes just working on it. We're not going to start with this shot, though. We're going to start with another one. So let's look at this one. And let's just let it play. Okay, so let's talk about simple things. What's easy? No problem tracking here. It's a simple 2D track. They hardly move, the girls. Much easier to create a background environment for this one. It can almost be a still photo because there is no dolly in, dolly out. There is no perspective shift. So that's the easy part. The hard part is extraction. I mean, you again might make the wrong assumption looking at it that it's an easy shot. Yeah, just, pull a key, put the background, and it's done. The problem with shots like this is detail, and we're talking mainly about hair and about the fact that there is a very shallow depth of field and there is a rack focus. So we're focused on this girl at the beginning of the shot. The other one is completely out of focus, and now we rack focus, and suddenly this one is out of focus, this is in focus. Everything that has to do with very soft edges and very fuzzy edges like hair, edges that are out of focus, edges that are motion blurred, which we don't really have here because there is no fast motion, are going to be hard. And we want to, and because these girls are basically filling the screen, it's a two-shot, we want to make it look nice. So we're going to start the course actually with this shot because it's a, we can call it a nice warm-up for the harder ones. And we'll devote at least a class on just extraction techniques. If any one of you has taken my previous NUKE course, the NUKE 217, we had a class about this. This is going to be sort of like a continuation of that class. So that's the second shot. And the third one, a very interesting one. So again, we can play it and immediately figure out that there is no big tracking issue, there is no big camera move. What the director wants in this shot is to have a sort of a passenger plane or a plane that crashed right over there. So it's a crash site, and she's walking right in front of it. So this is a matte painting shot. We have to create something that totally doesn't exist there. And we're going to work with a matte painter here, with my colleague, Matthew Connor, who also helped out and talked on my previous NUKE course, the NUKE 217. But besides the matte painting, it's going to be a very hard shot to integrate stuff into. As you can see, the lighting is very, very, how would I say, cruel, very restricting. The shot is very strongly backlit right there from the sun. The colors are very subdued, almost desaturated, so it's hard to bring in detail, make it look good, and make it fit in there. Of course, we have this giant flare going on top of everything, which we'll, of course, have to recreate or extend over the top of other things. So this shot can be a good challenge for integrating matte painting elements and creating a finished comp that feels coherent. Okay, so let's now talk about a typical visual effects input-output workflow and what it means in terms of color work. So we start by everything being shot by the camera, and once a day's shoot is over, dailies are created. Now, in the old days of film, old days, in the days of film, that meant scanning the film through a telecine or something similar, fast scan, and creating video files. Today, when almost everything is shot digitally, it basically means taking the raw footage and converting it into small, low-quality, manageable QuickTimes. Now, the important thing is that usually when the guy does this stuff, he also color grades the QuickTimes, because the raw material, of course, is not very nice to look at. It's probably too desaturated, doesn't have enough contrast. So the dailies guy looks at the shots and grades them either by a shot-by-shot basis or by sequences. And at the same time, of course, the raw material is taken out and sent to the lab. Now, I wrote DPX here because this is the most common file format in the film industry. And this is basically because that's always been used for scanning film. Nowadays, again, when everything is digital, or almost everything, TIFFs and EXRs can do even better. But most labs are still kind of built around DPXs, so that's why it's still the most common file type. All right, so now we move to editorial, and the director and the editor are cutting the film, and they're actually using the QuickTimes from dailies because it's faster and easier, and also because they're already color graded, so things look better for them. In the meantime, the raw material just sits there in the lab. Now a rough cut has been made, and editorial is starting to send stuff for visual effects. So they start by sending QuickTimes from their cut for those shots that need to have visual effects. And these are, of course, not to be worked on. We don't do the visual effects on QuickTimes, but they're important because they're used as reference, and they're used for by visual effects to assess the amount of work on shots and create bids and so forth. Once that is done, editorial is basically ordering from the lab the relevant frames to be sent to the visual effects. So now we have high resolution frames, and we have the QuickTimes. And of course, there is a big difference because the high resolution frames are raw and the QuickTimes are graded. So here's the thing now. We have to give editorial QuickTimes with our visual effects, but the QuickTimes have to look exactly like the stuff they already have there. If we send them something that has a different color, it's going to look weird to them and it will cause problems. The thing is that we don't have that color because we've been working on the raw footage. So we have to match by eye a color that was applied a long time ago to QuickTimes, and that's of course not always easy. Now on some movies, especially ones that have lots of visual effects and usually also are set up technically for visual effects, this will be solved by having a one unified LUT or lookup table that will be applied to all the footage, and editorial will be working with that lot, and visual effects will be working with it. That makes things very easy. Unfortunately, this is almost never the case in most movies, and that's where you have to go into grading your work to match editorial. And this is what we're going to look at now in NUKE. So let's open NUKE, and we want to look at the shot that we'll start working on in the next class, SH340. And first, let's bring in the editorial reference. So that would be in the ref folder. And we want the graded QuickTime, the one that has the grade. And as you can see, this is of course HD, and it's AVI-DNX. Now this codec is usually used when exporting or importing to the Avid. So in the film industry, it's pretty much the standard for QuickTimes. Now AVI-DNX HD comes in different levels of quality. The 36, which is this QuickTime, is the lowest one, so it's fast and quick, but the quality is not very good. We're going to use the AVI-DNX 36 here in this course for posting your shots for review, because it's small and quick to download. At a certain point where you want to show a higher quality work, you might want to jump into 115, which is a higher quality setup, larger files. So now let's bring in the original plate for this shot. And this is, of course, the 3K raw footage. And the first thing we see when we A/B between them is that they don't match. And the reason is that usually what you get from editorial is the exact length in the cut. But what you get from the lab in terms of high resolution frames, you usually get handles. Usually 8 frames at the beginning and the end, or head and tail. In this case, in our case, we actually have 12 frames head and tail. So you want to move it 12 frames backwards to match to the QuickTime. But if you also look at this shot, you see that it's actually starting at frame 1000, whereas our QuickTime starts at frame 1. So if we go back to the plate, let's change frame to start at and put it at frame 1. Now it's going to start at frame 1. Now we can add a temporary time offset and put it back to -12, and now if we A/B between them, they should match in terms of the frame. Now you see that in this specific case, the colored QuickTime is not too far from the original. So you can just go ahead and put a grade node and very easily kind of match this color. So it has more contrast, a little bit brighter, so you want to probably turn down the gamma, turn up the gain, probably more gain. It also feels a tiny bit more blue, so you want to maybe add a little bit more blue. You can look at the yellow colors. Maybe we went a bit too far in the gamma. Now this is all fine and dandy when you have a very easy grade like this, but things can very easily become very complicated, and you'll have a hard time matching the grades. And this is where a really useful new tool in NUKE 8 comes in, the match grade. So let's now take a look at that. So let's delete our own grade, and let's bring in the match grade node. And you want to connect your source to what you want to grade, and the target to the graded element. Now one thing you really have to remember, both source and target have to match exactly. And if you look at our resolution, when you A/B, it doesn't look different, but actually here we have 2880, and here we're talking HD. So if you try to use the match grade without reformatting your source material, it's gonna go all crazy, because the pixels need to be exactly on top of each other. So all you need to do is add a reformat node here and set it to HD so it matches the QuickTime. Now you can also see that there is a big difference between the quality, even reformatted, between the quality of the raw frames and the QuickTime. It's not just the color, it's just that look at the hair. I mean, we lost all of it. But the match grade will look through it and will still do a good job. So basically, if we look at our target and we double click on the match grade, we have to give it a few keyframes to check. And depending on the footage, sometimes one keyframe is enough. Sometimes you need more if there's more color changes going on through. In this case, you know, one might be enough, but we'll just give it 3 keyframes. So we go somewhere that we want to grab, we add a keyframe. Let's go another area, add another keyframe, and let's add a third one towards the end. And now we can let the match grade just do its work. So analyze reference frames. It's going to look at these frames, match the grade, and now if we look through it and we compare it to the QuickTime, and I'm A-Bing now, the only difference I'm seeing, if I'll zoom in, is the difference in quality, but the grades are spot on. So now you might say, here, my life is so much easier, I have this wonderful tool. It is a wonderful tool, but like all automated tools, it has pitfalls, and I want to show you a good example of when you don't want to use the match grade. So what I have here is a plate of one of the shots we're going to work on, and I took this plate and created a grade. And this time it's not even a QuickTime, it's still an EXR, the same format. Now, when you compare between the non-graded plate and the graded plate, you can see that there are some things that look a bit weird over here. And this is based on my experience. A lot of times, dailies grades are done on 8-bit QuickTimes, and the extreme ranges, especially the highlights, get crushed in all kinds of weird ways. And this is actually typical of a grade you might need to match to. And first, let's see what happens when we use the match grade node. So let's bring it on and connect it. And let's do the usual thing. Select 3 keyframes. And let it do the analyzing. Okay, so here's the result, and if we compare it to the graded plate, it's wonderful, excellent. It's almost 100% identical. Slight differences. So match grade is doing a terrific job. I think it's doing probably a better job than most of us can do by eyeballing and grading manually. So all this is great. But here is what happens if you start working on your comp. So to give you an example, I'll add a grade node here. Say you're working on your comp now, and of course this is before it gets that final grade. And let's say in your comp you're doing some color changes and you pull a little bit of the green out. So let's do that and start pulling a little bit of the green out. Just a little bit. All right, so look what's happening right there around the sun. Something very bad is happening. And if we look at the grade without the match grade, it looks good. So that's with pulling the greens down, that's without. Everything is well. So it's pretty obvious that whatever is happening is caused by the match grade. And basically, the reason it doesn't work like this is the way I created this grade was kind of simulate how grades are applied to 8-bit footage or 8-bit QuickTimes, all the clamping that happens and the crushing of the highlights. Now, match grade is an automated tool, so it doesn't think that way. It doesn't think, oh, well, but maybe I shouldn't crush the highlights so much, even though it's like it in the grade. It's just doing what it's supposed to do and trying its best to match. But this is causing problems because it's pulling and pushing the colors in a way that make it really hard to work on the comp without having all kinds of issues. So, in a case like this, you definitely want to go and create your own manual grade by eyeballing, and I have one here. And you can see that it's not as similar to the reference as the match grade did. But the good thing about this grade is that it doesn't hurt the highlights in the same way, because I used the clamp to kind of pull down the sky the way it was in the grade. And if I copy that little green pulling and put it here and we compare the results, so here we have these horrible artifacts happening. and here it's working fine. So then again, match grade is a wonderful tool, but be careful when you use it. Be careful what you match to, because sometimes it can cause problems. So now let's go back to our first match grade. So in case you do want to use the match grade, like in this case, which is going to work just fine, what you want to do is export a LUT file from the match grade so that you can use to grade your quick times. And for that, you go into the match grade, you go all the way down. It will save a CSP file. So you save it as CSP. You write, I'm overriding what I already had there. And then when you need to use that grade in your comp, all you need to do is create a vector field node. So you can read this LUT file and just load it. And this is it. So now you have LUT, that's without, that's with. So now that we have a LUT file, a grade, let's go and take a look at the basic setup for the script. So you start, of course, by bringing the plate. And I know there's always a confusion about in what color space to bring in the plate and what color space to look at. Well, EXRs are usually linear, so much as DPXs are usually logarithmic. It's not always the case, doesn't have to be like that, but there is a very simple rule, basically. Whatever you bring it in, if you render it out the same way, it will be exactly the same. So if you're worried about sending back to the lab something that will look different than what they gave you, as long as you keep that rule, everything will work. So if you bring the EXR as linear, you should just render it out as linear. Whatever you choose here as a viewing LUT doesn't really matter. If you decide to bring it in as sRGB, just remember to render it as sRGB. It will still look the same, and whoever is going to use this in the DI is going to load it whichever way they want. So there really isn't a big problem here. On the other hand, when you render your quick times, you want to render what you are actually seeing on the screen. In that case, you want to set them to the color space you're viewing, which in this case is sRGB. So we brought in the plate. Of course, we want to make it start at frame 1 and not frame 1000. So let's change this. And we also want to set our globals, first of all, to have the right range. So the shot is 120 frames. Let's set our range to 1 to 120. And the other thing you want to do, of course, and that's very important, is to set your resolution to the correct one. And that will usually be the last one that appears there. Here is our 2880 by 1620. So this is all set, and now you're going to do your comp. Let's just put a node here and call it comp. And at the end of the comp, you basically want to write two different outputs. One will be the raw output that goes to DI, and one will be for the QuickTime. So for the raw output, just as we said, you want to write back exactly the way you brought it. Write EXRs and set your color space to linear. That's as simple as that. For your QuickTime, you want to add your color grade, so we'll open a vector field node. And we'll bring in that LUT that we created. Is right here. That's with the LUT. And of course, we want to reformat. They usually will be HD. So let's reformat this to HD. Right here. And for the settings in the right node, so you want to write an MOV. So for this case, let's just go to our shot, to renders, Qt, and you see I have a separate folder just for the quick times, and let's give it a name, some name, just for now. MOV. And as you set it to MOV.MOV, it's going to give you all the options. So first, as I said, you want to set your color space to the one you're viewing. Otherwise, if it's set, for example, to the default gamma 2.2, your QuickTime will come out with a different color And that's a case for big confusion. So make sure you always match the way you viewed it if you want the editor or the director to see what you're seeing on the QuickTime. And then you want to set your codec. And as I mentioned before, we want to work in Avid DNX HD because that's the most common codec for the Avid. So let's set it to this. Click on Advanced and bring in this, and we probably want to use 23.98 frames per second if it goes to an editing suite like the Avid. We don't need millions of colors plus. That's for alpha or other things that don't need millions of colors. We want to set it to RGB levels because we're rendering at sRGB. That's important. If it was Rec 709, we'd do like this. No alpha. And finally, we want to use the 23.976 DNX HD 36-bit. So you see we have 115 and 175. These are higher qualities. For now, we use 36-bit. We set all that. That's ready to go. And that's basically it. Now, what I suggest is that you render out the first version, V01, which will be just the plate. And you render it out also as a QuickTime using your grade. That will allow you in Hero to quickly go back and forth between your next version, which will be already the comp, and the plate. It's also important that you have a good folder structure for your shot and that you can keep it consistent between the shots. Here is what I suggest. Of course, you can do any variation on that as long as you know where your stuff is. A 2D folder has all the NUKE scripts, the Hero files, any Photoshop files, and so forth. The 3D will have your Maya scene files, P3, or whatever you're using that's 3D software. In Elements, you're going to put all your matte paintings or renders. Plates, of course, will be the plate itself, as you can see here. Ref is a good one to put all kinds of reference material. For example, now we have the two QuickTimes from editorial, the non-graded and the graded as reference. And finally, the renders folder, or where you put your final renders or NUKE renders, as opposed to the 3D renders, which will go in Elements. And here we have a folder for each new version that you create for the EXRs, and the QuickTime folders that have all these versions of the QuickTimes that correspond to the EXRs. And as you can see, I named them V01, V02, and not T for take. That's simply because Hero will automatically look at anything named V number and treat it as a new version. So this is it for this class, and in the next class we're going to work on this shot, SH340, and you got a few JPEGs, and one of them should be the background for this shot. So take a look at it and feel free to start working on the shot, and I'll see you all next week. Bye bye.